Dugay-dugay na yata ko wag sorry ka ng video live na busy lang gamay niya. Sorry. But anyway, ang topic for today is Claveria or CM Recto. I think it's one of the streets that now we're in. It has really a very history. Unlike San Pedro, Claveria, those two, and Uyanguren, those three streets sa Davao nagkaroon that has a very historic na history. And San Pedro, which I think is a street now wherein you have like commercial districts, shopping, or ganing department stores. Claveria, in itself, it has its own identity. Through the years, ang story sa Claveria is that it has, I mean, from a simple nga street, it became probably one of the best streets sa Davao. It had been, during the 90s, it had one of the most number of banks in just Claveria alone. I think it went on to some, I don't know what kind of record, when they had the most number of banks. Other than that, Claveria is that it is a street wherein it has a very interesting it has a very interesting evolution through the years. Start off with, for example, during the 1920s, 1930s, wherein it had like the Awad building, and then through the years, it's so from Awad building, it had St. Peter's St. Peter Parish School, and then it had the Palma Hill nga house or residence, and then as the years went on, then it had new center nga theater, tapos then na hotels, na what do you call that, katong Biema, and then ang Mindanao Times newspaper nga office, and then Calle Bonifacio, Cortez, na atong double savings, and then right near the corner was katong Tagumpay, which it falls on sa Bonifacio na street. And then you had New Eagle Theater, tapos katong Hours Theater, and then in the 80s nagkaroon og katong Lawaan Theater, and then I think 70s na atong Aldabingco nga building, one of them, the tallest nga building sa Davao. Other than that, like katong Live Theater, and then Amehang, and then I think Davao Grocery during that time, and then a little further on katong Aldabingco Shopping Center, which was probably built in the 60s. Claveria, I would say, probably, if you have some Pedro for the shopping district. Claveria, it's kind of mixed wherein you have commercial districts, you have entertainment districts, and then you have kaning mga office spaces. Through the years, it has evolved, I would say. Claveria became, or CM Recto became one of the, in the 90s, one of, the busiest streets, such as San Pedro and Uyanguren. Claveria in itself, it has its own identity, I would say. Ang Claveria started off with probably, when it was probably in the 30s or maybe 20s, wherein it was still called Claveria or Calle Claveria, and then I'm not sure if when the name change started, probably in the 60s or 70s, I don't know. It was renamed as CM Recto. But the thing is that Claveria or CM Recto, people still would call it as Claveria. Anybody when you say Claveria, people would immediately know nga it is Claveria, it is CM Recto. The name has stuck through the years. Claveria, which was named after Governor General si Narciso Claveria, which was the exponent of giving us the Spanish names when he distributed the catalog of Spanish surnames. He was the cause, and he was the reason why we have the Spanish surnames. We might be Asian looking, but we have Spanish surnames. So it's kind of like weird when you say, we look Asian, but we have very Spanish surnames or last names. If you go to, let's say, Thailand, they have their own, they have their, Thai names, or when you go Malaysia, you have the Bahasa, but the Philippines, we have to probably, I don't know, if we have to thank Narciso Claveria as the reason why we ended up having Spanish surnames. I think it was, I don't know which, maybe in the mid to late, around mid 1800s, when he distributed the catalog of Spanish surnames. So, and then he sent probably people all across Luzon, Visayas. Having those Spanish, that list of Spanish surnames. But the thing, what is interesting is that some pages were torn off from the catalog itself. So you have, let's say this barrio had all A's of the Spanish surnames, and then you have another barrio, you have the B, and then so in effect you have a town wherein it's all the last names or the surnames or family names were all starting with letter A, and then the next town would have the letter B, and then so on and so forth. So we have Narciso Claveria to thank for that. And interestingly, I don't know who decided to have that street be named as Claveria. Was it Uyanguren himself? Maybe. So that name was probably stuck in the the Buenos psyche, where in that street still, even until today, is, I mean, people still call it as Claveria, in spite the fact that it should have been called CM Recto, which was is known as the Filipino nationalist. So it's just an irony in itself that we have here a street wherein a lot of people still call it by the old name, and you know, it's one of those weird things. It's one of those weird things wherein we are still knowing it, I mean, calling it by the old name. But I mean, probably, I don't know if it'll take a generation or so wherein people would be comfortable using CM Recto. I mean, calling it CM Recto, not Claveria, and same with even Uyanguren, which people still call it Uyanguren and not Magsaysay Avenue. So I don't know how long, you know, that people will tire of calling it Claveria, or calling it, I mean, calling Uyanguren as Uyanguren instead of Magsaysay. So I don't know. But anyway, Claveria, as I've said, it's a very interesting street, because probably I would say it was until the 90s wherein it was really a very busy street. I mean, any old timer, when you say Claveria, they can, you know, at the back of their, they can, I mean, they can think of that this part of the street where you had, like, for example, Minda Trading, they would know Minda Trading was on that street in Claveria, and then Rizal Extension. And when you mention, like, for example, Mehang Grocery, they would almost immediately saying, that's where it became the Gisano department store before. Then I think later on it became Avon Street, Avon office and store. So, you know, any old Bueno, there's a lot of parts in Claveria where it's still, for them, it's still fresh in their minds. The Davao of the 60s or the Davao of the 70s, where they would know exactly where is where and what is what. So I remember probably it was sometime you have the Hours Theater, but unfortunately Hours Theater it burned down sometime, probably, I don't know, maybe late 60s. So somebody's mentioned here, how about the Sinihan? Well, we had quite a number of movie theaters. So Claveria or San Recto, you had, I mean, you have the New Davao, and then the Center Theaters. You have, and then a little further, you have Odeon. You have the Eagle Theater, and then a short walk you have Ours, and then a little further you have Life Theater. The city theaters, we have the Claveria. I mean, in Claveria you have the Tagumpay, which is not really, it's a little just off Claveria, but Tagumpay and the Life, those are the CD theaters of the past. sadly, those theaters, and then also Lawaan, sadly, when the malls came, all those theaters probably had to sort of like, I don't know, maybe have to be like for other uses, converted to other uses. So I'm not sure if it became some churches. I'm not sure, but I think there was. So just like any other structure, you have to find new ways of using them. You have to find ways of, I mean, putting new life, breathing new life into them. I think I remember katong Ray in a sinihan, which is not in Claveria, but it's in Recto, at some point, because nobody bothered. Probably, I don't know, for whatever reason, they had to convert it into something else, like small stalls, retail stores. I don't know. I mean, maybe during its heyday, Claveria had its fair share of a number of movie theaters. Well, other than that, Claveria is also known for a lot of what we call office spaces. So you have how many a little taller in the buildings, and then which were I can't remember kaning kilid sa babista na building na isa ka building diha wherein at the top of it served as a TV na studio in the 70s. I remember nga isa sa host ato was, I think, Romy Tan. And then, people would flock to it, people would go to it, I think around maybe 5:30 during that time. Kina sila live nga show. I remember those times where it was just, how many TV channels you have? Maybe 2, 3, channel 13. There's 2 other ones. I'm not sure if it was called channel 4, and then there's another one. Then everything was just in black and white. So, life in those times, I mean, the 70s, 60s, it was fairly simple nga. I mean, Claveria was it was busy, yes. It had its own, activity during that time. Aldevinco building, not the Aldevinco Center, but Aldevinco building, which is now kaning Avida nga condo. Oh no, beside Avida nga condo, wherein it had quite a number of offices. So I think it's now being converted as a hotel. So, and then you have Lawaan, which I'm not sure if it was the first or the second that had escalators, or an escalator, because the escalator was just going up, and now you have to use the stairs. So Lawaan just had a going up an escalator and not a going down. But the Maglana building, or was it owned by the Maglanas, ang Lawaan, had some retail stores underneath in the basement, and then I'm not sure how many floors nga were in was devoted to office spaces. I'm not sure. And then in the 90s, sorry kung medyo kuan ko, but in the 90s or 80s it was supposedly a number of buildings to replace kaning UC's nga library, but I think it was only one that was built. It was a building designed, and I'm not sure if the contractor was also si kaning architect Wasson, but that building also it was built in the 80s, so one of the few were in buildings they were using modern materials like marble. I'm not sure if it was marble, but it was a modern design, using varied materials. Unlike before, wherein it was just like stone, but like before it was just wood. But in the 60s and in the 80s, it was probably that time we're in quite a number of buildings that were built. Somebody has also mentioned about Ideal Theater. Ideal Theater was also, I think, just very near Odeon. But Ideal Theater was probably built maybe sometime 60s or 50s, probably same time as Eagle Theater. Ano pa ba? That building designed by Tuazon, architect Tuazon. If any of you remember, it's probably the Davao Ice Cream House, wherein my brother's favorite was kaning banana float. Was it banana float? Banana or mango float. So, as in the 80s, things became more interesting because a lot of things sort of like appeared kaning Davao Ice Cream House, and then nagkaroon ng branch somewhere kaning sa may China Bank, nagkaroon ng branch ang what do you call that, Chiquis and Patis. Kung favorite ato katong ilahang kagay paborito na sila luglug, but then ang akong mind was something with a hot dog, which I can't even remember now, but it was my mom's sort of like go-to for comfort food, kaning Chiquis and Patis, which jokingly kami sa akong siblings, me and my brother would call it Shakies and Patis. Claveria is not as unlike now or in, probably it is re-emerging as something else, gentrified nga kind of setting, because of kaning condo projects that have developed. But other than that, even in the 60s and the 70s, Claveria was a very interesting place to go to. What else? What else that I can remember now? There are very interesting bakeries. What do you call that? Aroma? Yung Aroma Bakery ba ni? Sa may, just near sa Mayhan. Dito ko ganahan magpalit og atong patatas or egg cracklets, which until now, I don't know for whatever reason, I'm still craving for that kaning patatas. And I don't know, my kids don't love it, but ako ug akong wife, we would love it. Egg cracklets. So anyway, Claveria or CM Recto, which is which, I don't know. Until now, I would still call it Claveria, and probably people, to each is his or her own. They call it, some would prefer to call it CM Recto, others would call it, especially those mga the older generation would still call it Claveria. Other than that, it is a very interesting street. Hopefully, in lots of ways it will thrive, and it will serve its purpose, and it will thrive. It will find ways wherein it will adjust to whatever. Oh, before I forget, ang katudiang ko, there was a bank right beside right beside the Mormons church. Now somebody mentioned knew about theater. Well, about theater, interestingly, it's a lot of people during that time in the 60s it was very popular in the 60s and even in the 70s. It was not really seedy in the 60s or 70s. It was probably in the 90s wherein it became really seedy because it was showing us, not for the kids. But during the 60s and the 70s, they would show kung na mga Noranyan diha. They would show Nora nga mga films. I'm not sure about Vilma Santos, but I think Nora during early 70s or late 60s, where she made a live appearance in that theater. So and beside it katong center. So I would say it was really popular in the 60s and even in the 70s. I'm not sure if it is still there. Okay, I seldom go to Davao. I seldom go home. Thanks for kaning mga hatag comments here. Uno Studio was right on the corner of Claveria and then known as Cortez. The thing is that the divide is kaning Claveria, and then if you go, I'm not sure, if you go north, is it north? Kaning Moni Bonifacio, or they would call it Calle Escario before it was renamed as Bonifacio. The Calle Bonifacio before was what you call kaning Quezon Boulevard. That was known as Bonifacio before, and then I don't know, maybe sometime in the 50s, wherein they renamed it as, after the war, they renamed as Escario, as Bonifacio. My apologies kung namin madungog nagubos in the background. But anyway, and then Cortez. This is one of the weird. Why was it named Cortez? I'm not sure why, but it is not Cortez that was named. That was, people would think after the Spanish conquistador. No, it was just Cortez, Cortes, Cortez with the S, and not Cortez with a Z. Anyway, so Uno Studio was one of the big names of photo studio. It was they rented a space right below kaning Valgoson's office, and that Valgoson's building. It was in that corner. It was just funny. One time because we live sa may Cortez. I think in the 70s, from 70 to 73, we lived Cortez first, or 74, wherein we lived diha sa balay ni that apartment ni Dr. Feliciano. So, and then we moved sa kaning Valgoson's or Valencian cottages. So I would always walk that stretch. Sometimes go so many places. So I would pass by sa Uno Studio, which was, it was just weird because I know people during that time, they would, if you have the digital nga kaning mga retouching sa mga photos karon, people then during that time they was also retouch ang mga photos. If you have a studio nga portrait, the photographer would take pains nga to retouch, whatever in mga kung sa imuhang now, the photographer would retouch it. And one time they had like mga white people nga kon, I think they were probably priests in some order or some church we're in. Naka-comment lang ako na why are they looking, so sobrang pagkakuan ba, sobrang pagka-retouch, nagkanawong sila o kaning murag kuan hinon statue. It was just funny when I think of that. But anyway, unsa pa ba, somebody said nga New Davao Theater na signage still up. I would think na probably people would, the owners themselves, I think it's owned by the Aquinos, not sure, or Carrieros, but they should at least preserve kanang signage na. It's a very interesting piece of Claveria history and New Davao nga signage, even with katong Eagle Theater. I don't know if it's still there. I don't know. But those signages, those are parts sa history sa Davao or sa Claveria, and I hope it should be preserved. But anyway, what else? Let me just refresh. Hold on. Okay, people are also having comments, so it's better now I can also just read. My apologies, kadot lang. I'm just going over comments. I'm gonna review sa live video. Anyway, I'm saying 8 comments, but I can only see 4. But anyway. So if people can still remember Biema shoes. Asa ba ito lapit ng Biema? So may dual yata sa was it near sa, can't remember, was it near sa Live Theater or near sa kwan? I'm not sure. But anyway, Pink's Grocery. It's one of those groceries nga we're in during that time. Pag mag-shop ka dito, magkuhan ka dito for any of your groceries sa Pink's Grocery, they will give you, I'm not sure if people can still remember, they would give you a paper bag with a handle, paper handle. But there's a hardware near sa Life Theater and Imperial Hotel. Before I forget, Imperial Hotel, which is now maybe offices. But what else? Agudos photo studio. Can anybody? I know we have a photo of that in one of the albums. Agudos. I think they're popular with a lot of Kanina schools. They took photos of mga Kanina graduates. But mentioning kaning mga photo studio, I really hope that people surviving members of the owners, the original owners, I hope they can preserve those if they have the negatives or whatever of the studio. I hope that they can scan it, and then they can scan it, and then they can have a Facebook page of what the studio has done through the years, especially the Agudo studio, and then you have the Uno studio. I'm not sure kung kinsa yung nagtagiya ng Uno studio. But yeah, people of the old, they would remember Uno studio, they would remember Agudos, and people of the 80s, 80s, you have a little kaning sa Regina nga complex. You have what's this photographer? Oh Lord, kinsa na yung kuan? I can't even. For the love me, I can't. But I've worked with this guy before, a Chinoy guy who had a photo studio during that time, and it was a time wherein I worked with him. I designed a poster for Uyanguren Hotel before, and siya ang among photographer, and so I worked with the guy. There's a lot of these kind of very good photographers in the 70s and 80s who were very active sa camera nga kwan. I think he was one of the founding members of the Davao Camera Club. So anyway, what else? Kanto sa Claveria and Rizal Extension, there is a Imarsas bake shop. So that building was designed, I think, by the architect Ramon Magsaysay. So Claveria had very interesting mga structures because some of the buildings were designed by architect Ramon Magsaysay, and I think I would say nga New Davao was also designed by architect Ramon Magsaysay. Architect Ramon Magsaysay, along the stretch of Claveria, I think Babista building was also designed by him. He had like a varied number of structures designed by him and probably constructed by him. So Claveria, the Claveria now and the Claveria of probably 60s, 70s there's still mga remaining mga structures, mga heritage structures that's still there. I'm hoping they can find ways to preserve those remaining structures designed by architect Ramon Magsaysay. Also, there was a house which was, I think, built in 1933 or probably early 30s and maybe late 20s, but I remember seeing that house, and I would love seeing that house. It was just beside kaning student center. It was a very old house, a one-story house, medyo elevated siya gamay, but it was a one-story house, lovely design. And then when in the 80s, when architect Tuason was building that house, suddenly katunga balay in front of it, they just demolished it. And then I thought somebody would be constructing a new structure, but then nothing happened. I think it's some other structure now, but a lot of mga houses, beautiful houses along Claveria, is all long gone. And I hope people can submit photos, air photos, family photos of those houses if they have it. I mean, I would love nga, I would love that they send us photos of those houses they have. For us, I mean, especially the new generations now we're in, they have this longing of understanding history, yearning of understanding history, and so in a way of for us understanding history, aside from the textual history, we also have to see the visual history. So, and when you say visual history, it's the pictures, And I think I'd like to thank getting special mention sa mga comments. Si Jay Kikuchi, Peter Mante, Uwal, who else? Who else? Sorry, I just had to refresh. It's saying, I'm not sure what's happening here. It's saying 10 comments, but all I can see are just 4. I'm not sure it's but anyway, I think I mentioned before about some buildings. Anyway, si Jay mentioned about Cinerama. That I'm not sure kung unsa ang Cinerama. I know nga in the 80s it was there was another theater beside it which was called New Center. And during that time, nakasulod ko nga theater because it was showing a comedy starred by Ariel Oreta. After that, wala na ko I can't remember going back to that theater. But anyway, so I think we've probably mentioned a lot of buildings of the old along Claveria. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Anyway, sorry kung this was just too sudden. The thing is that this is the only time I had time for doing this without saying anything. Anyway, this will be in the video section of the page, so if people are going to be wanting to watch it, it's just in the video video section of the page. Other than that, as I've said, if anybody of you who has photos of old Claveria or old CM Recto, I mean, I would love to post it sa page. Anyway, you guys, especially sa Davao, you guys have a good night. Anywhere, have a good afternoon. On my side of the planet, have a good afternoon. And here's to a good new week to everybody. Okay, bye.